Om Namah Shivaya, 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 Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Narayana, Om Namo Jagadguru, Sri Krishna Vande Jagadguru, Sri Krishna Vande Jagadguru, Sri Krishna Vande Jagadguru, Sri Krishna Throughout our studies, we have been laying special emphasis on the practice of meditation. But it remains to be noticed with great care that meditation is a series of intense austerities, several levels of tapas, and not a mere rational thinking process. Meditation is not thinking. It is not even merely understanding in the ordinary sense of the term. There is a very severe significance behind what true meditation means or connotes. A disciple approached a guru. The disciple's name is Bhrigu and the guru is Varuna. Bhrigu, the disciple, approached Varuna, the master of wisdom, and requested, instruct me in Brahman. Adhihi Bhagavo Brahma. Iti Varunam Pitaram Upasasara. The Guru was the father of Bhrigu in this particular instance. In ancient times, most of the gurus are the parents only. The father is the guru, and he is quite adequate for the purpose of instruction in the higher realities of life. What did the Guru say to Bhrigu when he requested him to teach Brahman? Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva. Know Brahman through tapas. He did not go into descriptions, narrations, quotations, or citations of scriptures. Just one sentence of instruction. Know it by yourself through tapas. Here is the essence of spirituality for any one of us to appreciate. Spirituality is a way of living. It is not a knowledge that is to be acquired. It is accustoming oneself with the characteristic of the spirit, and to that extent living one's life with that particular vision directly in one's experience. The intense tapas into which Bhrigu entered on the instruction of the Guru ended in a realization What kind of realization did he have? Annam Brahmeti Vyajanat. He began to feel that all that is materially constituted is Brahman, including this body, including the entire created universe, physical and perceptible in nature. Again, not being satisfied for some reason or other, the disciple approached the Guru once again with the same request, teach me Brahman. These were wonderful examples of Guru and disciple indeed, because the disciple approaches again and again for the same purpose and expresses himself in the same manner, and the Guru in return mentions the same thing as the instruction, and he had nothing more to say. Second time when the disciple approached the Guru, Adhi Bhagavo Brahma, the reply of the Guru was, Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva. Why go on repeating this again and again? What does he mean by saying, know it by tapas? It was already told once. Now a second time he repeats the same instruction, and the good disciple enters into another type of intense tapasya as per the instruction of the Guru. intense meditation enveloped the consciousness of the disciple. He realized something quite different from what he experienced earlier. This time he realized Prano Brahmeti Vyajanat. He realized there is a vital principle behind all material structures. A vital energy is pervading all forms of matter. This is what he realized. Just as in our modern schools of scientific thought, originally the discovery was that matter is a hard, tangible substance. But the scientists also did tapasya by means of intense experiment and observation. They realized that there is energy content potentially present within all material substances. If the whole universe is materially constituted, the discovery revealed now that the whole universe is made up of energy only. It is a force that we call the universe rather than a thing or a substance. With this realization, again the disciple went to the Guru. Adihi Bhagavo Brahma. What is the kind of disciple is this? He repeats the same question again and again after having realized something which was quite good for all practical purposes. When once again the disciple approached the Guru said, Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva. A very good Guru and a very good disciple indeed. You asked me to teach Brahman, know it through tapas. Well, he had already practiced enough tapas. But the obedience to the Guru's instructions was so important to a disciple. He took it literally and went back for further contemplation in the form of intense tapas. And he realized something. What did he realize? Mano Brahmeti Vyajanat. He realized energy is not the ultimate substance of things. There is mind behind all things. The operation of the mind can reconstitute the location of matter, transfer material objects from one place to another place by processes of telecommunication, telepathy and the like. We in our daily life notice how powerful the mind is. Even if the physical world is strongly presented before us as perhaps the only reality available, the mind has a power over even the physical nature of things. So he went again to the Guru and said, Adhihi Bhagavo Brahma. The Guru said, Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva. Know Brahman through austerity tapas. Again he meditated by means of a tremendous austerity of his personality and realized that there is something about the thinking process or pure mentation. Discriminative understanding is higher than mere mentation. It is called Vijnana. Vijnanam Brahmeti Vyajana. Pure understanding, on which most of the philosophers depend for their conclusions, was realized by the disciple as Brahman. With this realization and experience, he went again to the Guru and said, Ati Bhagavo Brahma. There appeared to be some kind of dissatisfaction in the mind of the disciple, in spite of some apparently satisfying experiences through which he passed. Otherwise, there would have been no point in his approaching the Guru again and again with the same question. However, he went to the Guru once again and said, teach me Brahman. And once again, the same instruction. Tapasa Brahma Vijijñāsasva. Know Brahman through intense austerity. The transmutation of all the earlier experiences now takes place. It is not material substance that constitutes the world of creation. It is also not vital energy, electric force, and so on. It does not seem to be also mere thinking or mental process. It is also not understanding. Because though understanding, intellect or reason is the highest faculty available to the human individual, it has its own limitations. The greatness of intellect is that it has the capacity to know its own limitations. By knowing its limits, it can infer the presence of something beyond the limits of its own operations. Normally, no human being can go beyond this level. The greatest philosophers of the world were intellectual specialists, logicians. Pure understanding is their ultimate reach and nothing more can be known. But understanding is a process of analytically knowing something which is other than the understanding process itself. The apparatus of understanding is logic. What does logic do? It separates the subjective side and the objective side of anything. Even in a sentence, a part is the subject and a part is the predicate. The predicate may be supposed to be the object of this subject part of the sentence. Anything that is externally placed and is objective in character has to be somehow or other dovetailed to the subjective side in order that a comprehensive understanding of the situation may be arrived at. in forming a sentence, we use a link called is or some kind of verb. Without a verb, there is no sentence. This peculiar thing called the verb is what gives meaning to a sentence. If the verb is absent, there is no meaning whatsoever in a sentence. It connects the subjective side and the predicate side. Logic has this characteristic of knowing things by connecting two differentiated things. It assumes at the very outset that things are separated from one another. For instance, the knower is different from the known object. The known object is itself not the knower. It is something easy to understand. But some sort of connection has to be established between the known object and the knowing consciousness. This the understanding tries to do artificially by certain processes which are fundamentally and basically untenable. The untenability of logical inferences in the knowledge of anything arises on account of a dual role that logical inference plays in the bringing together of the subjective side and the objective side. These two cannot be brought together, really speaking, because it is already affirmed that the object is outside the subject. Having affirmed such a thing as the complete dichotomy of the object from the subject, the question of the bringing them together does not really arise. Here is the defect of logical thinking. Though it appears to be very perfect on an outer surface of observation, the object cannot be connected with the subject because it has been already assumed to be outside the subject. This is one side of the matter. The other side of the issue is, unless somehow or other, in some way, though artificially, the object is connected, cemented with the subject, knowledge of the object cannot arise. This cementing is artificial, is something very clear on a clear observation of it. Because the object that stands outside the perceiving knowing consciousness can never become part and parcel of the knowing subject. But unless it becomes related organically in a sort of oneness with the knowing subject, knowledge cannot arise. This drama of the perceptual process or the knowledge process arrived at through the function of the understanding or reason tells us finally that all our learning is artificial. Whatever we know is basically a husk. It is a big balloon within which there is no content. That is why even the most learned person in the world can also be a very unhappy person. This knowledge does not bring happiness. Professors, pandits are not necessarily happy persons. They have their agonizing sorrows. So vijnanam brahmeti vyajanat, not satisfied. The disciple went again to the Guru. Adhi Bhagavat Brahma replies, Tapasa Brahma Vidijnasasva. Do tapas once again and let us see what comes out. The obedient disciple plunged inside himself and delved into the roots of his own personality, deeper than material body, deeper than the vital pranas, deeper than the thinking mind, deeper than the understanding intellect or reason, and found something very mysterious. What did he? Anandam Brahmeti Vijana. He realized bliss is Brahman. What is our idea about Brahman? We are also seated here, many people thinking Brahman. What do we actually mean by this word? Every person will have every kind of fantastic idea about it. But all these ideas are intellectually construed with a framework of logic. As mentioned, as it is not possible to actually know the core of the ultimate Brahman through even the highest faculty available, namely reason and understanding. A self-identical process of appreciation of one's own self is to be called for. In meditation, this is the technique that we have to adopt. Therefore, it follows that meditation is not merely a bodily exercise. It is not merely a vital exercise like pranayama, etc. It is not a psychological analysis through the mind. It is not a rationalistic understanding like philosophy. It is another thing altogether that is within us. Our knowledge of our own self is not observable like a body of physical matter. It is also not to be identified with vitality or mind or intellect. It is something else. We seem to be something quite different from all these vestures. The probing through these vestures by tapasya is the art of meditation. We have to penetrate through the physical, vital, mental, intellectual layers, subjectively within our own self and objectively through the creation of the universe itself. Both through the subjectivity of our person and the objectivity of the created universe, we have to recognize one and the same being pulsating at the root of everything. Happiness is Brahman. Anando Brahmeti Vijana. After that, the disciple did not go back to the Guru. No disciple will go to the Guru after he is filled with perfect happiness through any means. Only when there is a trouble, one goes to the Guru or a physician. Like a good disciple, therefore, clever in understanding the secret of things, Bhrigu realized that the Brahman is constituted of bliss. But here again a question arises as to what is bliss? Human nature is so fragile and so incapable of understanding even the experience of happiness which one undergoes, that what is bliss is a question which cannot be answered. Are you happy? Yes, I am happy, you may say. But what do you mean by saying I am happy? You cannot explain it. I can only say I am happy, but I cannot tell you what is the meaning of being happy. While everything is describable, observable, analyzable, but happiness is something which is inscrutable. Brahman is such. No one can understand it by any means available to human nature. But it can be directly felt inside. Feeling melts into experience. Though we are happy oftentimes, this is not the kind of happiness that is to be equated with Brahman's bliss. The bliss of Brahman is perpetual. Since Brahman is eternal, the bliss of Brahman also is eternal. It is not contaminated by time process. Our happiness is fleeting. Today I may be happy and tomorrow I may not be for some other reason. There are 100 things in the world which can extinguish the little flame of joy that a person experiences in one's life. The sorrows in the world seem to outweigh oftentimes the joys of human beings. Whether joy is more in this world or sorrow is more is a question that each one has to answer for one's own self. Is the world filled with more sorrow than joy, or is it otherwise? You find it out by your own experience. However, if Brahman is the ultimate being and its nature is bliss, it should explain all the questions of life. Because the sorrows of the world, to which we often make reference, cannot be connected in any way with the eternity of the bliss of Brahman. Just as night cannot stand before day, sorrow cannot be visualized or experienced in any way, when Brahman's bliss is experienced directly in one's own self. Whatever experience Bhrigu the disciple had, he had it through tapasya, not through study of books or listening to lectures. No other means can bring this blessing. No katha, no sankirtana, bhajana, nothing that is outwardly motivated can bring this bliss of Brahman. Because we can attend to all these kathas and bhajans, etc., without the least self-control in us. Even an unself-controlled person can enjoy bhajan, but he will not derive the benefit of it. Because benefit of any kind of spiritual exercise, the benefit of it can be had only by self-control. In different stages of self-control, Bhrigu realized that bliss is the nature of Brahman. The bodily longings, which are the cravings of sense, have to be subdued first. As long as these cravings persist physically through the sense organs, through the desires and passions of any kind, the meditational process cannot go deeper than the physical level. That tapasya, which was practiced by Bhrigu in the form of utter self-restraint enabled him to go deeper, not merely by intellectual analysis, by actual experience of one's own vital existence, mental existence and intellectual existence. One has to be therefore purely subjective in one sense during meditation. There is no external interference at that time. When you reach the deepest level of your being, you will also reach the deepest level of the whole of creation. This is why it is said, "Thou art that." Tattvamasi. Thou here means the deepest essence of spirituality in a person is identical with the deepest core of the cosmos. Identity does not mean one merging with the other, as if they are two different things. It is a coalescing process which is indescribable through our mind. It is like sinking into deep sleep, where our bodily, vital, mental and intellectual functions melt down, as it were, in a sea of experience, where we remain as we are, and we do not require to contact anything else to be happy. How pleasant is sleep, everyone knows. It is more pleasant, more delighting than any joy that one can conceive. Let even the emperor who has all the world for himself to enjoy not sleep for 15 days. See what happens to the joy of the king. He will say, "Don't talk to me, let me sleep. Let the empire go, but I want to take rest and sleep." He wants to go into himself and not into the empire. Though the mind, the sense organs wrongly suggested that you are in the empire and your joy is there outside. But the test is actual experience. Daily you are taken to Brahman. Arahar Brahmagamayati, says the Upanishad. Great wonder is this, that every day we are pulled into Brahman when we are in dreamless sleep. That is why the very presence of that apparent contact we have with the deepest being in ourselves tells us that we can sleep more and more, and it is not good to get up. Let me sleep little more, because the honey-like bliss is poured into one's experience in the state of deep sleep. Upanishad says, you are actually in contact with Brahman, but you do not know what is happening to you. You come back like a fool, as you went like a fool into the state of deep sleep. Why does this happen? Because the absence of self-control, absence of self-restraint of the different vestures mentioned, the body, the pranas, the mind and the intellect. These vestures or koshas, as they are called, are agitations of spirit. It is a disease of the mind, concretized in the form of visible personality. To melt it down into the substance of which they have arisen, deep contemplation of an utter subjectivity in nature has to be practiced. Finally, it would mean that one has to love one's own self, and one cannot love anything else. Even the least tinge of love for anything other than your own self, looking almost like selfishness, looked at from another angle of vision, is the greatest altruism one can think of. Why does it look like selfishness? Because you conceive of the self into which you enter as a bodily content. It is as if you are going inside your physical individuality. That is why you say wrongly that it is a selfish going inside. But the deepest inside in you is not, it has become the self of all other drops also. So this thing which you are entering into the state of deep sleep is that into which everything sinks, and therein is our final solace and blessedness. But however much we may go to sleep every day, Brahman is not realized, because desires of the mind, the passions of the sense organs, which are potentially present even in the state of deep sleep, cloud the intelligence, which is flashing forth from the root of Brahman, which gives pleasure on one side and ignorance on the other side. We are happy in sleep, but we are also unconscious that we are happy. So there is a curse upon this happiness. That curse, like Durvasa's imprecation, is nothing but the desires of the sense organs unfulfilled, which crave to jump out upon the objects outside at the least opportunity provided. Therefore, any amount of sleep will not make you know Brahman unless the senses are controlled and consciousness retreats itself from the outer level to the inner level until it reaches the deepest level where consciousness establishes itself on consciousness. That is the bliss of Brahman, which Bhrigu realized by the blessing of the great master Varuna, who was his father. Wonderful was the teacher. He wouldn't utter one word of teaching, really speaking. Know it by yourself. Go deep into yourself, work for yourself, and toil for yourself. Know it for yourself. That's all. That is the teaching of the Guru. And so obedient was the disciple. He never questioned this pithy, so-called meaningless instruction of the Guru. Took it seriously and went inside by self-control, control of the operations of every level of the personality, and reached that bliss which is the very essence of all existence. Sat, pure existence, is also Ananda at the same time, and it is all consciousness at that time, so we call it Satchidananda, existence, consciousness, bliss, towards which end we have to struggle hard as the disciple Bhrigu endeavored. Hari Om Tat Sat.